Warning: the following program contains extreme coarse language and mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is extremely advised. Good evening. It is ADC. It's Talking Truth Thursday. And we'll see if we have, there will be some profanity. Of course, you know it's ADC. Like and subscribe across the board, all the different platforms. We are the most censored show online, and we're going to be even more censored thanks to the info, the bill that just came out, the laws that are in this country of Canada. Bill C-11 has been passed by the Senate. You know the Senate, the overpaid capitalist colonizers that decide the rules that are the holding people accountable, their accountability for Canadian government. Yeah. Well, anyway, they passed the very controversial Bill C-11. It has become law, and they're touting it as a huge aspect for Canada, for all these different things. And it's might not necessarily be that. We talked about this months ago here, in regards to what this means for Canada. The big push for it is the fact that it's going to mean more Canadian content, making it more of a Canadian centric for your online streaming giants. It's going to hold places like Twitter and Facebook and Blue Sky, and where you're broadcasting, YouTube, accountable to ensure that we have Canadian content and access to Canadian content, like myself, who's based in Canada. Now, the issue comes up because, if you've been watching me, if you're able to watch me, I appreciate it. Like I said, there's a lot of censorship, a lot of staggering, a lot of throttling on our accounts. So when we're looking at your BC-11, it's to, according to the Royal Assent, so your Royal Assent is basically your rubber stamp from the Governor General of Canada. Same thing in your provinces as a Lieutenant Governor. It means jack fucking squat. As soon as a bill is pushed through by any government, the Royal Assent is just justifying the overpaid shitbags that represent the pedophile monarchy. Anywho, so it's received this Royal Assent. Bill C-11 amends the Broadcasting Act to modify Canada's broadcasting policy. So we all know, if you're Canadian, you know about the CRTC and the regulations. If you watch any of Canadian networks, it says that if you they uphold the Broadcast Act from the CRTC. If you have any problems, PO Box, blah, 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 in Toronto, Ontario, XY, whatever the postal code is, and they will look at those things. So if you're offended by some of the content, this was all pretty much anyone who was a Karen or a Chad in the 70s and 80s that wanted to complain about content, about profanity and stuff. Like there would be a lot of, and there could be a lot of complaints lodged to the CRTC based on talking truth. So the whole aspect of it there is the fact that it's changing the Broadcast Act, which is from, like said, many decades ago was this Broadcasting Act. And with the Liberals touting this is great, the right-wing lunatic fringe touting that F Trudeau and this is censorship and whatever, based on the fact that it is coming from the Liberals and was voted on by the Singh-led NDP to get it to the Senate, and then the Senate passed it because the Senate are just a bunch of white privileged, capitalist compensated colonizers who don't give a shit about people. They just will put through whatever, and then they go and spend their money and don't give a shit. Because if they actually give a shit about people, you remember the bill that was supposed to get royal assent, or was supposed to, that's gone to the Senate for review? That bill about poverty, the bill about disability in Canada, about increasing the basic amount for people on disability in Canada. So not every disabled person in Canada goes to apply for MAID so they can commit suicide because they can't live in this godforsaken fucking country because they are being bludgeoned to death by capitalism. You remember that bill? Yeah, the Senate didn't have time to read that one. They had time to read the Bill C-11. And this Bill C-11, again, it continues. New federal law will require digital platforms such as Netflix. And let me just share this so you guys can see what I'm reading here. Let you read it as well. And there we go. We will zoom in a bit because if your eyes are as bad as mine, you can't read that. So let's see. That should be a little better. All the links are in the show notes as well. So if you want to see these articles, feel free to click on the links below. So the streaming bill is new federal law will require digital platforms such as Netflix, YouTube, and TikTok to contribute and promote Canadian content. Liberals' Online Streaming Act passed its final vote in Senate and received royal assent. Bill updates the Broadcasting Act to bring online streaming platforms under the regulatory authority of the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, aka the CRTC. Also sets steep penalties for digital platforms that don't make Canadian content available to their users in Canada. Government said the law will not apply to individuals who post on social media, which had been a chief concern for those opposed to the changes. It will apply to platforms such as Facebook and TikTok that distribute commercial programs like sporting events or live singing competitions. So as we can see by the fact that it says once the bill receives royal assent, so they basically cutting and pasting because they have no staff at the Star because they're another faceless corp that is on very limited staff, overworked staff to do this stuff. So once the bill receives the royal assent, it has received the royal assent. A policy directive will be issued to the CRTC, required to develop regulations following consultations with the public. So right now, we just had it flash up that there are already consultations with the public and or somewhat consultations with the public. Lots of the, like I said, the right-wing nut job conservatives are going off about Trudeau and it being censorship and whatever. They are correct on it being censorship, but not for the reason why they're posting it. It is not Trudeau being like China or any of this other bullshit, racist, homophobic narrative that they continue to spew. This is based on the fact that the social media piece of the puzzle, they say it doesn't affect social media, which right now it does not. But when we are going to go and have that, the Bill C-11 put into place with those new regulations, the question is, how will it affect social media? And we're not talking like when they say it doesn't affect social media, it doesn't affect social media posting on social media. So that's an easy one. I still don't believe that either. If you remember from conversations we've had in the past on past programs, particularly on the People's Voice Network, we discussed what Bill C-11 could do and the fact that during the pandemic that Prime Minister Trudeau implemented a new act, Police Information Act, basically giving the police, RCMP and CSIS the ability to monitor, and they tell you to tell on your neighbors and snitch on your neighbors if you suspect them being terrorists. And don't get me wrong, I do agree with the fact that we do not want the terrorists, especially the domestic terrorists that are the Freedom Convoy, to run rampant. But God knows that nothing is stopped there, as the fact that they really don't give a shit about keeping them under lock and key. Litch is able to travel wherever across the country. The Premier of Alberta is visiting with the Take Back Alberta group at a rally in Alberta. It just started 7 o'clock. So, hey guys, if you're watching on monitoring me on your cell phones, good to see you. And fuck you. So the whole aspect of this is the back to the bill. So when we're looking at the bill of C-11, it doesn't say anything about, like, it very carefully didn't talk about the social media piece, but talks about the streaming piece. And that streaming piece is a very interesting piece as well, because the fact that one of the most popular programs on the streaming platform Netflix was based out of Canada, and that was Schitt's Creek. And Schitt's Creek gained a lot of subscribers for Netflix. Well, Schitt's Creek was produced by the CBC. And the CBC, in their capitalist idea, they created CBC Gem. So if you're watching any of the NHL playoffs in Canada on Rogers Sportsnet or on CBC, you will hear one of the broadcasters spewing propaganda for CBC Gem. Some of the programs are good, like Schitt's Creek, like Kim's Convenience. Problem comes up there, though, is the fact that now with this Bill C-11, the Netflix, the Amazon Prime, the Disney Plus, all your different streaming platforms that CBC took their programs away from, so they have their own platform, and CTV has taken stuff away from to have their own platform, and Global's done that, and all you can count how many of them have taken away from American platforms, American-based platforms, so it is through Canadian content. So all the good shows, all the popular shows were taken away. So the Canadian platforms can gain the ad revenue. So yes, CBC Gem is free for the viewer, but You know there's ad revenue there. You know there's promotion. There's all these different things that they're gaining from having that program on CBC Gem and being exclusive on CBC Gem. So what used to be on Netflix, which was considered Canadian content, is now exclusive to CBC Gem. So either Netflix now has to go and purchase the rights from CBC again to have Schitt's Creek or Kim's Convenience or any other very popular Canadian produced programming, or they have to buy old, wretched Canadian produced programming that was absolute shit when it was forced down our throats on our 3 channels without cable here in Canada. Love the Beachcombers growing up. I sure as shit don't want to see reruns of the Beachcombers. Littlest Hobo's already being used as filler on every Canadian channel, specialty channel. Don't want to see that come to Netflix or Prime or any of these other things. And that whole thing is you have Crave, then you have Prime, and you have Paramount Plus. You have Rogers, Shaw, whatever the fuck you want to call it this week, and you have Bell. Well, Eastern Canada has Bell now. Eastern Canada has Rogers now, and so does Western Canada. Western Canada has Rogers. It's still considered Shaw. It's still under the brand of Shaw, but it's owned by Rogers because, yeah, we focus on this Bill C-11 to regulate content. We don't focus on Bill C-11, or we don't put any sort of asterisks or any sort of amendment in Bill C-11 that regulates the fucking monopoly of Rogers. So Rogers owns the monopoly on broadcasting, on internet service, on cell phone service in Canada. Just so you're aware that Rogers Communications is the big dog in the country, because it might be under a different brand, but ultimately they own it. They own the brand that you have. So being in Western Canada, I've been a Shaw customer and subscriber for decades. And now, yes, I'm still a Shaw subscriber, but it's owned by Rogers. So Rogers can go and make whatever changes they want and do some shit and cost cut. And they're already going to go, if you see the shit that's happening with the, when we were talking about pro wrestling and the WWE and the purchase by the conglomerate that also owns UFC. And I'm not going to look it up right now. They already talked about cost cutting jobs. So Rogers is going to cut jobs with the monopoly, but Bill C-11 is not going to do fuck all about that. Bill C-11 is about control, and it's about controlling the narrative. And if that narrative is on YouTube, under the guise of we need to promote Canadian content. So they say that it's to help smaller channels grow, because the YouTube algorithms do not benefit the smaller channels, especially with content like we have here. There's a reason why YouTube shuts us down on a regular basis. There's a reason why we have 12 subscribers on YouTube, because they don't like this content. They don't like the fact that we will regularly talk about COVID's not over, that there is no winner, there is no side in the Russia-Ukraine war. They're all shit. They're just different sides of shit. There is no fucking hero. In national politics in Canada, national politics in the United States, there are no heroes. There is no one wearing a white fucking hat. Capitalism, as you will see if you go to our store at co-fi.com/talking truth, you can see the new mug, beer mug, so you can drown your sorrows or fucking drink enough that you don't fucking pay attention to the decimation of society, of the cesspool of society that we live in. Anyhow, that capitalism is bad people portraying good people because they have money. And that is your 100% clear definition of capitalism. It's also the 100% clear definition of your heroes and your villains. So when we're talking politics, we're talking any of this stuff that gets us shut down from YouTube. It gets us throttled on Facebook, gets us blocked on Twitter. It's the truth of the matter is capitalism is killing everyone. And if you are someone of an influence that carries a message, if your message is ours, you'll be shut down as quick as we are. But if your message is supporting capitalism, go to it, buddy. Let's kill fucking society for the next dollar. Apologies again. As you know, I tend to fall into rants, and the rants are the fact of the matter is we wanted to go and look at Bill C-11 in different avenues. So you saw the STAR, which is a capitalist compensated organization. So let's go to the Citizen Lab that is run by the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and the University of Toronto. And so this was Bill C-11 explained on April 23rd. So we're looking at almost 2 years ago. (2021). So they've got the critiques. They've got what does it cover. Privacy Commissioner of Canada, the privacy is long recognized as a fundamental right. So they've got that sort of thing of that it's a right. It's your freedom to have these sort of things. Problem being, like we said before, that we are in a part of society that is capitalism driven. And with such, we are forced to buy into the capitalist bullshit. So looking at the commonly known as Bill C-11, proposed in November of 2020, passed in 2021, but didn't pass Senate because Parliament was dissolved for a federal election. Reintroduced this with amendments as an online streaming act. Bill seeks to amend the Broadcasting Act to account increased prominence of internet video and digital media to prioritize the needs and interests of Canadians and inclusion and involvement of Canadians of diverse backgrounds in broadcast programming. It adds undertaking that conduct broadcasting over the internet to the regulatory scope of the CRTC. So there is the smoking gun. When we're talking about censorship, they want to regulate what goes online, similar to what they do with the CRTC. So either they will regulate my message so you'll never hear it, or they will ensure that I am forced to obey the CRTC regulations, which means that if I'm broadcasting and saying the F word, or I'm saying any other of the words that they deem that George Carlin said that of the 7 words we don't say on TV or on broadcast or over the air, or whatever the case may be, that according to that, I would have to be, because it's considered adult, even though the warning is not safe for work and all those different things that we post, we would have to be on at a later time. I'm getting old. I'm tired. When we go live, I don't want to be on at a later time at this point. So that's one thing. But also that whole thing of the regulatory. So like we said, when we're looking at it, prioritize the needs and interests of Canadians and as undertakings that conduct broadcasting over the internet, which would give CRTC the power to regulate almost all audio-visual. Wow, I can't talk tonight. Let's show that on screen so you guys can read along with me. All audio-visual content distributed via online platforms, including monetized content on social media services. So, according to the bill, and they're not getting into the meat of it at this point because they don't want to admit to any of that stuff, or they don't want to have to come clean on what the bill is. When it says mandating all audiovisual content distributed via online platforms, including monetized content on social media services, well, guess what? If you pay $8 to Old Muskie, you've now monetized your social media content. If you boost your ads on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, you're now monetizing your content. This can include compelling them to make use of the Canadian talent, mandated that they make contributions to the Canada Media Fund to support production of Canadian content and improve discoverability of Canadian content on their platforms. So they want to have the Jeff Bezos, which is fine. Take that motherfucker's money, all of it, but don't give it to the Canadian government or the Broadcast Act or whatever other bullshit you want to fucking call. And homelessness and world hunger. Those are easy fucking things to do with that piece of shit's money. But no, they're going to fine him and force him to pay. Same with Muskie, same with fucking Zucks and all the other twits. Old fucking Jack, who owned Twitter, monetized it, gained lots of capital from it, sold it to Muskie, well, left it under the hands of a ownership group who then sold it to Muskie. Him and his Blue Sky Blue, whatever the fuck you want to call it, that'll be another one that'll be regulated by this bill. If you're Canadian, if you're American, you're already under surveillance from the FBI and CIA if you speak ill will towards Jim Crow Joe or Ron Disenfranchised. Alongside this, the bill also removes a 7-year term limit for CRTC-issued broadcast licenses, a regulatory process which will not apply to internet broadcasters, adds a mechanism of imposing conditions on broadcasters without them being bound to a licensed term, introduces monetary funds for violating orders and regulations issued by the CRTC. So the good news is you don't have to be licensed because if you are like me and we're part of the commercial radio industry or commercial broadcast industry, you know the CRTC are a bunch of fucking knobs and faceless corporations get licenses for media outlets and then they buy more media outlets and then you get one fucking message. So when you're looking at it, as much as there's some good content on these stations, they're owned by capitalism. Your local radio, your locally owned and operated radio is no longer. It doesn't exist. There's a couple of examples in here in Alberta and in Saskatchewan of a couple of former radio people that owned the private stations, but like that is the way of the dinosaur. And as soon as the current management structure leaves or the owner decides he doesn't want to do it anymore, those will no longer be privately owned. They'll be corporate owned, like everything else in this fucking world. Supporters of the bill state that it would allow CRTC to compel foreign streaming services to follow similar regulatory obligations to conventional radio and television broadcasters. Like I said, CanCon. So if you have Shaw, if you, it's a thing called Stingray Radio. That's the commercial radio is under Stingray. It was the how many different things. It was Standard Radio when I worked for them. It was owned by the Slate family. Anyway, it's now Stingray Radio. It's broadcast through your satellite provider, Stingray Radio, and for their channels, they have to have a Canadian content. And if you look at CanCon regulations, so let's go in there, because I don't know. Like I always want to say, the people want to know what the how is it defined? What is defined? What is the percentage? So protecting Canadian culture and identity, of course they are. Leave it to. So this one's from, it's from the government of Manitoba Education. So unlike Alberta, the education is fucking decimated by conservatives. The conservative in Manitoba just doesn't fucking show up for work. She's just a moron who's nowhere to be found. Anyway, let's go there. We'll share this tab instead and put it on the stream. And yeah, so protecting Canadian culture and identity. And this was done at some time. So the CRTC was established by Parliament in 1968, an independent body that reports to Parliament and responsible for all radio and television broadcasting in Canada. So right off the bat, anyone who's watched before, or you've seen me on other programs, you will know that I do not believe in independent bodies, because just like the independent body of Elections Alberta here in Alberta, they're directly connected to the existing current government. So don't give me the bullshit about it being independent. One of its main goals is to make sure the Canadian artists and stories reach the Canadian public. Parliament believes it's important that the broadcasting system in Canada give voice to the talents and shared experiences of Canadians, or to preserve our culture and identity. Now, in theory, that sounds fantastic. I'm all for growing the culture of our First Nations and Indigenous and other cultures who have come to Canada. I don't need any more white privileged, white supremacist, capitalist-driven colonizing content. Don't need it. We've had enough of that throughout the years. Just because it's considered CanCon, number one, doesn't make it good. A lot of CanCon is absolute fucking garbage. The only reason they get airplay is because they're CanCon. The other aspect is a lot of them are not of members of the global majority, or the 2S, LGBTQ, IA plus community. They're white privilege. And Renee has told us many times, I love the word caucasity. It is 100% caucasity, the CRTC. Because they're not looking for how they can increase the culture of the global majority, or the culture of the Indigenous peoples, or the culture of the 2S community. They're looking at how they can increase Canadian culture of content that's mostly done by white people. All right. So here's your rules. In radio, all radio stations must ensure that 35% of the music they air each week is Canadian. That would be why, if you're listening to country music, the majority of your content was, for a long period of time, was Shania Twain. Other content we got was Anne Murray. And not saying anything about Anne Murray. Anne Murray had some brilliant music, but holy shit, there's only so much Anne Murray I can listen to. Then we got Gordy and the Hip. We got some really good artists there that get played. Holy shit, Kim Mitchell must be on the CRTC, because if you listen to any radio station or even the Stingray radio on the satellite, you will hear Patio Lanterns. I guarantee it at least once a day. So that's part of your 35% of the music that airs each week as Canadian. In addition, commercial radio stations must ensure that 35% of the music that air between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday is Canadian. Again, it's getting better. We've got a lot of newer artists that are coming out. People that are representing, they're not getting the airplay they should get, but there's choices now. Members of the global majority, members of the Indigenous peoples, the 2S community are getting that opportunity to release music. That music could be considered CanCon, but for the most part, your music directors of these commercial radio stations are white, privileged, capitalist compensated colonizers. So they're going to pick the most popular, which, if you're looking at contemporary hit radio, is your Justin Biebers, your Drakes. And not to say that those guys aren't talented. However, well, Drake is a member of the global majority, so he does hit that piece, but his internalized white supremacy and his push to just be bought by capitalism kind of takes him out of the equation. However, that is the majority of the music that you hear. In Alberta, if you're on a country station, you will hear Gord Bamford, you will hear Brett Kissel. And at one point, Brett Kissel put out good music. That point has long since passed, since he became a right-wing religious freedom fighting fuckwaffle in support of the Freedom Convoy. Anywho, back to the regulations. Ethnic radio stations must ensure that at least 7% of the music they air each week during ethnic programming periods is Canadian. So if you have an ethnic station, then you have that ability to you are representing the global majority to begin with, and you would have 7% of that music aired would have to be Canadian. So that is a lot less than the 35%. They're not really regulating that so much, but the ethnic radio stations are not commercial radio stations, so they are not getting the reach of what a commercial radio station would be getting. So protect your Canadian culture and identity. French language radio stations must ensure that at least 65% of the music they broadcast each week is in the French language, as well as at least 55% music aired between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday must be in the French language. So for people like my daughter, who is taking French immersion, and others that appreciate the French culture and understand French, they can listen to the French language radio stations and understand that the French language radio stations are geared towards French speaking people. So that does make sense. That with that sort of regulation, that does make sense. Here's where it comes into the sticking point for me. So private television stations, aka or example, CTV Global and ethnic TV stations must achieve a yearly Canadian content level of 60% overall measured during the day between 6 a.m. and midnight, 50% measured during the evening broadcast period 6 p.m. to midnight. CBC must ensure that at least 60% of its overall schedule measured during the day 6 a.m. to midnight is Canadian. And this adopted from the CRTC's mandate, what is Canadian content, and those sort of things. So that all seems really good, well and good in regards to ensuring the Canadian content. Problem that we have here is it's not protecting local content. So it's only protecting Canadian content. So what happens is these stations will do a simulcast. So you see it with CBC with the national, CTV with their national news. You see it on radio where they only have certain programs that are broadcast live, local in those marketplaces. The others are being simulcast from other markets, or they are being just played. That is a content that has been purchased from out of market to be played during those times. So by not regulating the capitalism of the CRTC and the capitalism of media, you're not really protecting your Canadian content. Yes, you still have to play the Canadian content, but your announcers aren't local to the area that they're broadcasting in. And they allow shit to go on. So you have Canadian content. So yes, the news is Canadian, but it's broadcast out of Toronto for Edmonton, for Calgary, for Regina, for Saskatoon, and so on. When I was growing up in Saskatchewan, we had local news in Regina, in Saskatoon, in Prince Albert, and in Yorkton. Now you have local news in Regina, and it's broadcast across the province. There are no local. You have the Global, I guess, would be, that was the CTV at the time. Global does have reporters and stuff based out of whatever, but the majority of the stuff that's being broadcast on a provincial level is coming from based out of Regina. And if you have a reporter, they're coming either out of Regina or Saskatoon. You do not have a reporter coming out of Prince Albert or Yorkton unless they are working for the local radio station, which is owned by a conglomerate based out of Regina or Calgary or Edmonton or that. So again, your local programming isn't really local. And that's where the argument I come in with the CRTC. And we go into that whole aspect of the CRTC, and we go to the supporters of the bill. Let me just share that here on there. So supporters of the bill say they would allow CRTC to compel foreign streaming services and to follow some sort of regulatory obligations. We just went through that. Result in at least $830 million in additional funding by 2023. Well, it just happened in 2023, so it's not going to be $830 million in additional funding by 2023 because it's been passed in 2023, so maybe 2025. Opposition has directed criticisms of the bill for granting a large amount of power to the CRTC, who are unelected regulators and receive very little guidance from Parliament or the government. Unclear applicably to user-generated content on social media services also face concerns and infringes on freedom of expression. And that's where I come in for Bill C-11. Freedom of expression. We know damn well if you're regulated by the CRTC, you're going to be regulated on what you can say. So if I speak ill will towards the provincial government here in Alberta, I'm being regulated, I'm being monitored and surveilled by Elections Alberta. If I say anything ill will towards the federal government, then you add the RCMP and CSIS. Because according to the Prime Minister, any sort of opposing view towards government regulatory bodies could constitute as hate speech and as a terrorist event, and would be regulated by the RCMP. And that's where they said, like I said earlier, that they are calling for people to snitch on your neighbor. It's beyond snitching. If you speak out against the government, you will be censored. Guaranteed. Unless you're a right-wing religious freedom fighting fuckwaffle. Then our government of liberal centrists will allow it to happen. Because a liberal centrist, or in the United States, a Democrat, would rather allow a fascist to voice their displeasure and to gain a foothold in society than someone with a socialist mindset, or even further to the left than the socialism. They don't want to hear that we don't agree with all government. They don't want to hear that it doesn't matter red, blue, orange, green, federally in Canada. Red, blue just won't do in the States. They don't want to hear that's a one-party system. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of bickering, this sort of thing. What would happen? Yes, I would wholeheartedly agree that if the Stephen Harper IDU-driven mandate given to Pierre Poilievre and the federal conservative government get into office, we would be more fucked for people of the global majority, for our Indigenous peoples, and people of the 2S community, and people in poverty than we are under Prime Minister Trudeau and the Liberal NDP co-op. However, Prime Minister Trudeau is a liar. Why do I say he's a liar? I say he's a liar based on the fact that he stated in his original election campaign and promises, when I voted for the Liberal Party of Canada, that he was going to clean all the water up on our Indigenous people's lands. All rural reservation water sources would be clean drinking water for our Indigenous peoples. Guaranteed it's not. That he was going to take care of the citizens during COVID. That no one was going to fall through the fucking cracks. Well, I can tell you firsthand, he's a liar. And it's guaranteed he didn't do it. A little bit of money to the kids' help phone has gotten us where? Bell Let's Talk every fucking year. I know a number of people that worked for Bell that were treated like shit, were abused during their time at Bell, left due to health concerns, mental and physical, and were let go or forced out. Bell, let's talk about hypocrisy. But our Canadian government and all our Canadian fucking famous celebrities and all this other bullshit that you believe in, they go in supporting this. It's like the actress from Kim's Convenience came out and said, this is a great thing, Bill C-11. Bill C-11 is a good thing for Canada. How? How is this good for Canada? Because if you're going by the fact that they're going to gain money and it's going to force the conglomerates of a Netflix or an Amazon or any of the other American providers of streaming service, Disney Plus, to provide Canadian content, sure. It doesn't say they have to provide good Canadian content. And the CBC is going to do everything in their power to not give up the exclusivity to your show, Kim's Convenience, and to the show of the Levies in Schitt's Creek. Because what else do they have to offer? If you watch the CBC like I have, very few programs outside of their investigative journalism, which has been decimated due to cutbacks and um, government funding reductions, or fucking faceless corpse that work on the national making more money than your reporters. So those programs are going to the wayside. So they need to have good Canadian content. Where are they going to get the good Canadian content? Well, right now, I guess you'd be getting it from people like me. You could get the content from streaming, from streamers, independent media. That would be great. But guess what? The only way that I would be able to be broadcast on the platforms as Canadian content if I fell under the guidelines of the CRTC. And as you can tell, most of my content on this program wouldn't fall under the guidelines of the CRTC. I would not be welcomed by the CRTC. As much as I'm censored by the conglomerates in the United States, censored on social media, censored online, censored locally, censored by your so-called pseudo-celebrities here in Alberta, I sure as shit would not be welcomed by the CRTC. So again, I ask you, where are you going to get the content? Because there's only so much of just for laugh gags that I could fucking stomach. Or Cash Cab. You already have shitty programs that are used as filler on your specialty channels. Do we just add more of that shit so it counts as Canadian content? So Chorus and Global can make more money? That's the solution? We're going to do that, and then we're going to force the Facebooks and the YouTubes and the TikToks and the Twitters to regulate Canadian content and amplify Canadian content? You know what, if that means for those providers or Rumble, as Rumble is we're on Rumble right now, I believe. Who knows? The way the system goes, we get stunted. We will be on there in a replay. So if you're watching this, hey, how's it going? We are a first left, fully fucking left, not fake left, not progressive, and not fucking left to the center to bring you to the right. We are 100% against the right on this fucking network. If we're regulated by the CRTC, we won't be able to say any of this stuff. None of this stuff would get through. And we're already being directed by the propaganda, or the propaganda, as I would say, the propaganda for profit that's being spewed by our corporate media, or MSM, mainstream media, or the bigger independent broadcasters who are bought and paid for by sponsors. That's some real talk for those Albertans watching. So we're not bought and paid for by sponsors. We're not regulated by the CRTC at this point. If we are regulated by the CRTC, we'd have to follow a bunch of guidelines. And I don't know. Well, I know for me, the fact I wouldn't fit in within the fucking CRTC box. I know a number of our comrades that do great programming, like Blueprints of Disruption, Jessa McLean, and the crew from that group. I know they wouldn't fall into the box of the CRTC. So what is the next step? Well, the next step is we fight for the freedom of speech. Because right now, the freedom of speech is being given to the freedom of hate speech. the homophobic, transphobic, racist, religious freedom fighting, right-wing fuckwaffles own the narrative because they bring capital. We said recently you had Tucker Carlson, or Cucker Tarlson, as I would fucking say, and Don Lemon being fired by their mainstream media networks. Where are they going to end up? Well, they're all about the Benjamins. They're all about the bottom dollar. So sure as shit, they're going to end up somewhere that is center to right or far right, because that's where the money is. Money's not on the left. We're trying to come together. All you want to do is bitch and complain about other fucking podcasters. I want to talk the fucking truth. I want this message to get out to people to understand that if we don't talk now, we won't have a voice to talk later. Follow us all along the boards there. Mastodon, we're there. We're on TikTok. We're on if you get us to 1,000 subscribers on TikTok, I believe we're at 900 we're 97 away, I believe. I think it was the last thing. So if we can get to 1,000 subscribers, next week's Talking True Thursday, hopefully with a one of our guests that was supposed to appear, will be broadcast live on TikTok. So follow us on TikTok at ADC Truth. Follow us on Twitter at ADC Talking Truth for the show, or for me at ADC Truth. Got a couple of fundraisers going on for the show. It's co-fi.com/talking truth. And I got to show you our new coffee mug. Well, you put coffee in it, but it's more of it's a frosted glass mug. And the internet is going really well. And here we go. Let me just share this tab for you. There it is. Support the show, Talking Truth about capitalism. Capitalism is bad people portrayed as good people because they have money. Inspired by Ross Cole 89474735, our new comrade on Twitter, designed by me, and dual designed, printed, and distributed in Canada. And don't forget all the other items that we have available, including all Curries are beautiful ACAB, rescue dogs, don't be trash, respect the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, or I'm going to identify as you/your problem. Support the show there. And we have, on a personal note, we have partnered with our buddies at TSN Radio, the AM Nasty Boys. That's Nielsen in the Morning, TSN 1260 in Edmonton. And you can get the AM Nasty Tales of the North Thunderbird frosted beer mug to celebrate the run for Lord Stanley from Matthias the Mighty, Reviver of Bush, true protector of the North, described by many as the greatest kingslayer of the land. Number 14 for the orange and blue, it's Thunderbird. So you can get that. You can get that mug. You can get the coffee mug as well. All net profits donated to the Ben Stelter Fund. And if you want the shirts, because we did the mugs, visit our buddy Dustin Nielsen, amnasty.ca, and you can get the Tales of the North Thunderbird official tees. Again, all net profits to the Ben Stelter Fund for kids with cancer, the Stollery in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Again, support the show. Like, subscribe, smash that like button. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Go Oilers, go. We'll see you next week.